In the quiet town of Greenville, New York, in the prestigious restaurant The Glass Room, an arrogant billionaire decided to have fun at the expense of a waitress and her daughter. He thought he would humiliate a simple girl with a battered violin. He was sure she would fail. She is not from his world, but he did not know the main thing. Behind this girl is a history that he is unable to understand, a history that can speak through music. The Glass Room is a pearl on Greenville's Central Street, among cozy coffee shops and bookstores. An establishment where, under the soft light of lamps, waiters in snow-white shirts served dishes worthy of a museum display case. Sara, 37, had been working here as a waitress for 6 years. Her days passed in a routine, 12-hour shifts, an eternal smile, restraint in the face of any whims of customers. She did not complain. Stability, albeit on the edge, was a rare luxury in her life. Every evening after work, her daughter Emily was waiting for her. The girl sat on a bench opposite the restaurant, crossed her legs and strummed the strings of her old violin. This instrument was more than just wood and strings. It was a connection with her mother, with her past, which Sara rarely talked about. Sara herself once dreamed of the stage. She studied at a prestigious music school in Manhattan, showed great promise, but everything changed. An unexpected pregnancy, lack of support, a break with her mentor, returning to her hometown. The violin then went into the closet and disappeared from her life. But one day, little Emily found it. Without a word, she handed her mother a dusty case. Sara looked at it for a long time, and then for the first time in many years, she sat down next to her and played. Without notes, without plans, only from memory and love. Since then, Emily has not parted with the violin. By the age of 14, she was already performing complex pieces by ear, and local teachers admired her ear and sense of rhythm. But Sara refused offers to promote her daughter in competitions. Emily lived at her own pace. She played, read, and sometimes worked part-time in a music workshop. That very evening, Sara was late at work. One of the VIP clients, Richard Langford, a billionaire owner of an investment fund, had booked the hall for a special dinner. His demeanor left no doubt. He was used to being the master of the situation. When he saw Emily, his attention was immediately drawn to the case behind her back. "Is this your daughter?" he asked Sara. "Yes, sir." "And what is that she has?" "A violin. Does she play?" He chuckled loudly, mockingly. "In Greenville? Of course. I hope she knows something other than the dog waltz." There was laughter around his table. Sara paled but said nothing. "Why don't we have some fun?" Langford continued casually. "Let him play. A small private concert." He didn't know that he would soon regret the offer, because music is not about class, money, or status. Music is truth, and truth does not always flatter those who are used to dictating the rules. "I'll leave you a good tip, by the way," Langford chuckled, taking his wallet out of his pocket. He placed a $100 bill on the edge of the table, as if throwing down a challenge. Emily looked at him silently. There was no fear in her eyes, but no confidence either. She seemed unsure of what this was all about, but at the same time, something inside her seemed to have accepted the fight. "You don't have to, Amy," Sara whispered softly. "I'll play," the girl suddenly answered. She came closer, opened the case, and took out a violin. The conversations in the room died down. The waiter's heels froze, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. "Well, let's begin," Langford drawled mockingly, leaning back in his chair. Emily took a breath and put the bow to the strings. Sara, watching, noticed that her daughter's hands were not shaking. The first note sounded fragile, as if uncertain, but after a few moments, the hall was filled with sounds that were not typical of this place. This was not just a game. It was a confession, a story. Emotions turned into music. The melody grew stronger, rang with tension. Even the cooks in the kitchen opened the door. Sara stood without moving. Something in her chest squeezed, but it was not anxiety. It was pride. She recognized the piece. Meditation from the opera Thais, the same one that she had once played herself, which Emily had heard only once. And yet now the girl put something of her own into it. Pain, a dream, freedom. When the last note died away, The hall fell silent, and then thunderous applause. But the loudest clapper of all was from a man in a gray jacket with an attentive gaze and silver temples. He approached Sara after the performance. "Thomas Rine, the Academy of Music in Boston. We need to talk about your daughter." Langford was still sitting motionless. He wasn't furious. Not yet. But inside, like a poorly oiled Swiss mechanism, something creaked. He looked at the girl with the battered violin, at these people clapping for her as if she had just performed at Carnegie Hall and not against the backdrop of a provincial restaurant bar. And to his irritation, he had to admit, it was strong, too strong. "You have a very talented daughter, Sara," he finally said, trying to regain his tone of authority. "I didn't expect that. A pleasant surprise." Sara nodded. She was already standing at the table again, as if nothing had happened. Emily, meanwhile, carefully put her violin in its case and sat down. Langford turned his gaze to Thomas Rine. "You said the Academy of Music?" "A private school in Boston. We train young musicians with great potential, and I think I saw it today," he answered calmly. "Ah, Boston," Langford drawled as if thinking out loud. "And what are you offering? A place for a couple $100,000 a year? Or is this, so to speak, a charity?" "In special cases," Rine answered without a trace of irritation, "we provide full scholarships. Tuition, housing, food, everything. And Emily is one of those cases." Langford did not like this. He felt his control slipping away. It was the same irritation he felt every time someone dared to have the last word. "Well, you know," he said a little louder, so that he could be heard at the other tables. "You can, of course, give out scholarships to whoever you want. Anyone, maybe. But I have a different approach," Langford said, looking away, as if sharing an insider's opinion. "For example, I could provide the girl with a professional instrument, a real teacher, solo performances." He paused. "If, of course, she shows loyalty, or, say, accepts a more reasonable offer." Rine looked at him with mild surprise, as if assessing not so much what was said as the intonation itself. Sara pressed her lips together. "Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Langford," she said calmly. "But for now, we will just talk." No decisions, he did not object. But a plan was already unfolding inside him. The girl was a nugget, and nuggets are not lying around everywhere. He did not like to miss out on something that could be turned into an asset. Why not invest? Make a project out of her? Fund her education, guide her, and then, when she takes off, stand by her side as the one who discovered her. Not that polite old man from Boston. Later, when the restaurant was empty and the staff were clearing tables, Richard approached Sara. He spoke without arrogance. "Sara, I understand. You are used to managing on your own, and that commands respect. But you and your daughter are not the kind of people who can afford to refuse good offers. I am not your enemy. On the contrary, I am offering help." "Do you want to buy my choice?" Sara asked quietly. "Or buy my daughter?" He chuckled. "You can only buy what is for sale. Everything else is a matter of time and circumstances." Sara wanted to answer, but before she could, Emily appeared next to her. "We are not for sale," she said simply, "and we are not afraid." Langford looked at her for a long time. He was too smart not to realize that there was something about this girl that he couldn't control. Something that couldn't be put into a contract or put into an account. And that was what angered him the most. That same night, in their tiny apartment on the outskirts, Sara was sitting in the kitchen. In front of her was a cup of brewed tea and her laptop, open to the website of the academy that Thomas Rine had talked about. She stared out the window, motionless. Emily came in. "Do you think it's worth it?" she asked. Sara didn't turn around. "I don't know, Emmy. This is a different world. It's a whole different level. Responsibility. Everything is different." "And you think I can't handle it?" Sara closed her eyes. The girl was asking questions that were too adult. But maybe that meant she was ready? "I think you can handle it," Sara said quietly, "and I'm afraid I won't be able to be there." "You'll always be there, even if you're far away," Sara smiled. Her daughter was growing up, beyond her years, confidently, deeply, and it was scary and inspiring. The next morning, Sara finally agreed to meet Thomas Rine. They were sitting in the same restaurant, now empty, as if the evening that had changed everything had been cut out of reality. Rine was calm and respectful. "You once studied at a music school, I found out," he began. "You had a good reputation." "I did," Sara nodded, "but it all ended quickly. And yet, you were able to pass on to your daughter the knowledge that others take decades to gain." Sara fell silent. Then she said quietly, "I wanted her to have at least something of her own, something real, so that she would know that talent is not a curse. I want to offer her a chance, no strings attached. The academy, the scholarship, everything official. But I have to warn you, it will be hard. Strict discipline, a new world. It's emotionally difficult, especially for those who are not from their circle." "She can handle it," Sara said. "I'm scared, but I believe in her." Rine nodded. "She's not just talented. She hears music, real music. That's rare." When he left, Sara remained sitting by the window. Her chest ached. It felt like the familiar world was falling apart. But there was something right about this. Something just right. Meanwhile, Richard Langford was calling his assistant. "Find out all about this Rine, about the academy, about the scholarships, and prepare an alternative. I don't like it when things are taken away from me." He stood by the window of his hotel room. Behind him was Greenville, his city, his stage. But now there was a girl in it, one he hadn't predicted. It made him angry. It meant he wasn't done yet. The GL Room restaurant was preparing for Friday night as if it were a performance. Everything was sparkling. The glasses, the cutlery, the waiters' glances, the menus polished to a shine. The owner personally walked around the room, checking everything down to the smallest detail. And for Myra, as always, ordered 2 rooms, the main and the small. One for negotiations, the second for entertainment. The administrator asked Sara to stay for the shift. Knowing that N4 preferred her, she agreed, but her thoughts were elsewhere. 3 days had passed since that evening. Thomas Rine sent an official invitation, confirmation of the scholarship, a list of documents. He didn't press, but he waited. Sara read everything, printed it out, and hid the papers in a drawer in the kitchen, as if she were telling herself, "If I say yes, everything will change forever." Emily didn't ask anything. She just played, every night, in headphones. Sara heard familiar phrases, Vivaldi, Schubert, and then strange, unknown melodies, her own. The girl was looking for herself. That evening, Emily came to the restaurant earlier than usual, with a case in her hands. Sara was surprised. "What happened?" "Nothing," Emily answered. "I just feel like I should be here." Sara tensed up. Intuition told her something important would happen today. By 8 o'clock, the hall was full. Langford was in a good mood. He laughed, praised the wine, generously left a tip. "Where is your young star?" he asked loudly when Sara served the dish. "Will there be a concert?" Sara did not have time to answer. Emily came out of the shadows, calmly, reservedly. "I can play, if you want." Silence fell. Eyes turned. Someone paused with a glass. Langford laughed. "Round 2? Excellent. I hope you're as prepared today." The music in the hall died down. Silence hung in the air, taut as a string. Emily stood by the window. Against the backdrop of the evening city, in the soft light of the lamps, she seemed fragile, almost ephemeral. The violin was the same old one, the bow worn, but the movements were precise. And she began, this time not a classic, a modern piece, her own, based on a sonata. It was risky, not according to the rules, but fair. The music came in waves, at first quiet like the first rain, then more powerful, sharper. Emily did not notice the audience. She was not playing for them. She was playing to say, "I am here, I can do it, I do not ask for permission." When the last note faded, there was silence in the room. No one applauded. A few long seconds, and then the first clap, hesitant, the second, the third, a wave. People stood up. Some whistled, some shouted, "Bravo!" This was not just a performance. This was recognition. Langford clapped. but he did not smile. He watched with cold interest. He had lost, but he had not left yet. A few minutes later, Rine came up to Emily. He shook her hand. "There is no choice now. Emily, you must go. This is not a request. This is a duty to what is inside you." Emily looked at her mother. Sara nodded. "We will start the paperwork tomorrow," Rine said. "I've already prepared everything." "I'll go," Emily said calmly, when the hall was empty and Sara was changing. Langford stood at the counter, arms crossed. He looked at her carefully. "Congratulations," he said. "This is not an act of politeness. This is an asset." Sara came closer. "This is a person, and this is her choice." "Everyone makes a choice," Langford answered harshly. "But sometimes it is better to accept an offer than to regret it later." He held out a business card. "I can give her everything, a stage, contracts, a team. Let her think about it." Sara did not take the card. "She will think about it, and she will choose. Without you." Sara did not sleep that night. Emily slept peacefully, on the floor next to the bed. The violin lay nearby, the case open, as if the sound itself was afraid of disappearing if it was hidden again. The folder with the documents from the academy was nearby. There was a note in the cover. "For Emily, talent is wings. Don't hide them." Sara looked at her daughter and thought, perhaps for the first time in many years, she didn't have to be afraid of the future. The morning was especially quiet. No sound of a violin, no rustling of paper, no clatter of cups. Sara was the first to wake up and lay for a long time, looking at the ceiling. Emily slept against the wall, hugging a pillow. The violin lay next to her, without a case, as if afraid to disappear. In the kitchen, Sara poured herself some coffee. The documents from the academy lay on the table, aligned to the millimeter. They were waiting for a decision that she still couldn't fully make. Everything was incredible. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, housing, food, insurance. In 2 years, the opportunity to audition for Juilliard. Sara took out an old album. "Is that you?" Emily asked, approaching. The photo shows a young girl with thick brown hair at the piano, Manhattan School of Music. Sara nodded. "The last year before you were born. I was 19. You were beautiful." "Thank you. I thought I would become a soloist then. I studied 10 hours a day." The teachers said, "Promising." It seemed like everything was ahead. "What happened?" Sara turned the page. A photo from a party. She and a guy with a violin. He was tall with a bright smile. "Is that him?" Emily asked quietly. "Martin. He was older, a graduate student. We played together. It was all like in a movie. Love, mistakes, long conversations. And then I told him I was expecting a child. At first he was silent. Then he disappeared." "Are you left alone?" "Almost. My parents were shocked. They refused to help, especially when I decided to leave you. The teacher begged me to take a leave of absence, but I already knew I wouldn't come back. Everything started to fall apart. I went to Greenville, got a job, and then you were born. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Sara looked out the window. "I was afraid you'd think I was the cause of my downfall." "That's not true," Emily said sharply. "I know, but it was hard then. I cried at night. Not because of you, because of myself, because of how I'd lost everything. And then you picked up the violin, and I realized the music hadn't gone away. It just came to you." They sat in silence for a long time. Sara held the photograph. Emily held her hand. "I'm not afraid to leave," the girl suddenly said. "I'm afraid to leave you alone." Sara smiled through her tears. "And I'm afraid not to let go, but you have to go. Not because you have talent, but because you are ready. I wasn't so brave when I was your age. But you didn't give up. You raised me. That's stronger than the stage." "No, honey," Sara shook her head. "That's the stage, just different. And music is the stage too, just in a different form." 2 days later, Rine came again. This time not to the restaurant, but to the house. He got out of the car and smiled when he saw Emily at the door. "Everything is ready," he said. "We fly out of Albania tomorrow morning. The driver will be there. The escort from the academy will be there too." "We've signed everything," Sara said. "Thank you for waiting." "I never doubted it," Rine replied. He left. Sara led Emily into the room. The suitcase was packed. The violin was wrapped in thick cloth. There was a letter on the nightstand. Sara handed it to her daughter with a trembling hand. "You can read it on the way. Just in case. I can't say important things out loud." Emily took the letter. She didn't open it. She just hugged her mother. "I won't let you down," she whispered. "I don't even doubt it," Sara whispered back. "Everything will be fine," she said. "I know," Sara answered. That evening, Sara went into a restaurant. Not to replace, just like a guest. The owner was surprised but did not ask questions. She sat by the window, ordered a glass of wine, and watched as at the next table a teenager awkwardly played on a piano. Sloppy with errors, but with sincere diligence. Sara smiled. Once she was like that. Now, her daughter. And somewhere in the office on the second floor, Langford watched the video. The title read, "A New Star, a Girl with a Violin, who blew up a restaurant in Greenville, signed a contract with the Rine Academy." He closed the laptop, thought, then pressed the call button. "Prepare me a list of young musical projects, and tell the lawyers. I do not want the Lang's name to still pop up in this story." Albany Airport, 6 in the morning, almost empty. Emily sat by the window, watched the lights of steering cars moved in the distance. On the knees, a letter from the mother. She still did not open it. Nearby is a violin in an old case and a small suitcase. All that she took into a new life fit in 2 hands. Thomas Rine looked through the documents. His assistant, a young woman named Kate, corresponded on the phone. No one rushed Emily. There were 40 minutes left before departure. She could just be. Finally, she turned the letter. "Emily, if you read it, it means you are already on the way. I guess I'm sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and trying not to cry. Outside, you as always are calm, but I know you. You have a storm inside you. You just know how to hide it. You are stronger than I was at your age. You are more honest with yourself. You are not afraid to go forward. I am proud of this. Remember, music is not only a scene. This is you yourself. This is your truth. Do not change yourself for the sake of other people's expectations. And if one day you lose the note, remember that I'm nearby, even if only in memory. With love, Mother." Emily closed the letter. Tears came to my eyes. And suddenly, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The Rine Academy was located in a suburbs of Boston, in an old brick building with a tower, where there was once a library. Stone stairs, high ceilings, classes with piano and soundproof walls. Everything here breathed music. Not ostentatious, not glossy. Deep, concentrated. A girl named Lily, a pianist, became a neighbor Emily around the room. Everyone played perfectly at the academy. Some are technically almost soulless. Others are emotionally but chaotic. Professor Vincent, after hearing Emily, said, "You do not have enough shape, but you have something that they are not taught. This is not a technique. This is a person." Emily was engaged in 6 to 7 hours a day, sometimes with tears, sometimes with the feeling that she does not cope. But every time I wanted to quit everything, she recalled Sara's words, "This is your truth," and continued. 6 months have passed. At the winter concert of the Academy, Emily was put to last. So Rine himself decided, as a point, as a climax. She went on stage in a black dress, which helped to choose Lily. In the hall, teachers, producers, journalists. In the hands is no longer an old violin, but a new donated by the Academy. But the first nursery she still kept in her room. Emily played the play which she wrote. The melody began with the topic that Sara played her as a child, passed into a complex, almost symphonic part, and ended with the same motive, only mature, past. When the last note sounded, the hall stood up. It was not just a standing ovation, it was a recognition. The Rine stood against the wall. He smiled. He knew she went through the main test, not academic, internal. A week later, an interview was published in the music magazine. The article was called "Emily Brown, as a girl from the working town forced the whole hall to freeze. Subtitle: My first teacher was called Sara. She worked as a waitress, but it was she who taught me to hear the music. Sara read the article in a half-empty cafe. When I saw my name, I could not restrain my tears. The waitress nearby asked if she was bad. "Everything is fine," Sara whispered. "It's just happiness." Greenville continued to live his life. People discussed the elections. New houses were built. The restaurant changed the owner. Langford no longer appeared. Officially temporary removal from business. No one was especially bored. And somewhere in Boston, the girl whom he wanted to humiliate went on stage more and more often. Her name was remembered, not because of advertising, and because of the truth, due to the sound that did not come of the instrument from the inside. Music is not about who is louder. This is about who's sincere. Sometimes one evening is enough for everything to change. If you have a voice, do not be silent. If you have a note, play it, even if the violin is old, even if the hall is full of indifferent persons. Sometimes 3 minutes, sufficient to, the world remembered your name.